My name is Daniel Reeves, and I've been a park ranger at Death Valley National Park for 17 years. Before I tell you what happened on March 15th, 2024, before I explain why I can no longer patrol certain areas of the park after dark, I need you to understand something. If you're planning to camp solo in Death Valley, if you think you understand heat and isolation and the brutal honesty of the desert, you need to hear this story. What I'm about to share could save your life, or at the very least, prepare you for what might find you in the hottest place on earth. Before continuing, if you subscribe and like this video, you'll be helping to bring more stories like this to light. Stories that need to be told. And I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. Have any of you ever been to Death Valley? Have you felt that specific kind of silence that exists only in extreme places, where even the air seems to hold its breath? There's a section of Death Valley, about 23 miles southwest of Badwater Basin, where the salt flats give way to something else. We don't advertise it on maps. The coordinates don't appear in any official park documentation. The area covers roughly 8 square miles, and we call it the Narrows, though that's not its name on any chart you'll find. The official designation is Sector 19, and in my nearly 2 decades as a ranger, I've learned that some designations exist not to help people find places, but to help us remember where not to send them. What I'm about to tell you goes against every protocol I've sworn to uphold, against the non-disclosure agreement I signed in 2016 after the Henderson incident, against the very foundation of trust between the National Park Service and the public we serve. But after March 15th, after we lost Sarah Chen, after I learned what really happens to solo campers who venture into the Narrows, I can no longer stay silent. I grew up in Bishop, California, just north of Death Valley. My grandfather was Timbisha Shoshone, one of the original peoples of this valley, though he married my grandmother and moved north when I was young. He used to tell me stories about the valley, about places where the heat did more than kill, where the desert remembered everything that ever died in it. I thought they were just stories, the kind of tales you tell children to keep them from wandering too far from camp. I spent 5 years working search and rescue in Yosemite before transferring to Death Valley. I've pulled bodies from crevasses, talked people down from Half Dome in lightning storms, and carried injured hikers through snow at 10,000 feet. I've seen what nature can do to the unprepared. I thought I understood death in the wilderness. I thought I'd seen the worst ways the natural world could claim a life. I was wrong. Not nature. Something else. Something that uses nature the way we use tools. In my 17 years at Death Valley, I've responded to 47 heat-related emergencies, 12 fatal car accidents on the park roads, and 23 search and rescue operations for missing persons. Of those 23 searches, we found 19 people alive, 3 dead from exposure or dehydration, and 1 we never found at all. His name was Marcus Henderson, and he disappeared in Sector 19 on July 4th, 2016. We searched for 3 weeks. We brought in dogs, helicopters, thermal imaging drones. We found his campsite, his backpack, his water bottle still full, his satellite phone showing he'd been in that exact spot just hours before we arrived. But Marcus himself? Gone. Not dead. Gone. The distinction matters more than you know. After the Henderson case, 2 men in suits arrived at the ranger station. They didn't show badges, didn't give names. They had us all sign documents with DHS headers and classification stamps I'd never seen before. They asked us questions about what we'd seen at Henderson's campsite, about any unusual readings our equipment had given, about whether anyone had experienced any anomalous sensory phenomena during the search. They used words like temporal displacement and dimensional membrane integrity. I thought they were crazy. The lead investigator, a man with gray eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you, told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Ranger Reeves, the Timbesha people knew to avoid the Narrows for 10,000 years. Your grandfather's stories weren't mythology. They were warnings in the only language that could survive generations without writing. You should have listened." Sarah Chen checked in at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center on March 14, 2024 at 2:47 p.m. I wasn't on duty, but I saw the entry in the log the next day. Solo camper, experienced desert hiker, planning 3 nights in the backcountry. She had all the right gear, all the proper permits. She'd hiked solo in the Mojave 7 times, knew desert survival protocols, carried a GPS beacon and satellite communicator. She was exactly the kind of visitor we love to see. Prepared, respectful, aware of the dangers. She told Ranger Martinez she wanted to camp near the salt flats, away from the tourist areas, somewhere she could experience true isolation. Martinez gave her the standard warnings about heat, about flash floods, about the importance of checking in every 24 hours via her satellite device. He showed her the approved camping zones on the map. She thanked him, loaded her gear into her Jeep, and drove south on Badwater Road. What Martinez didn't know, what none of us knew until it was too late, was that Sarah Chen wasn't just an experienced desert hiker. She was a geologist specializing in halite formations and salt flat geology. She'd been researching Death Valley's geological history for her doctoral thesis at UC Berkeley. She had maps that weren't park issue, maps that showed Sector 19 in detail, geological survey charts from the 1940s that marked something the surveyors called the Shimmer Zone. She was looking specifically for the Narrows. She'd read Marcus Henderson's blog posts from before his disappearance. She thought she knew what she was looking for. She thought knowledge would protect her. That's always the mistake. Knowledge doesn't protect you from what's in the Narrows. It makes you visible to it. March 15, 2024 started like any other spring day in Death Valley. I reported for duty at 6 a.m., temperature already pushing 82 degrees with a forecast high of 116. Spring in Death Valley is deceptive. Tourists think spring means moderate temperatures, but Death Valley doesn't do moderate. Spring means the thermometer might dip below 100 at night. That's all. I spent the morning doing routine patrols along the main roads, checking on the handful of campers at Furnace Creek, making sure the water stations were full and functional. At 11:23 a.m., I got a radio call from Martinez. He sounded concerned, professional, but with an edge I recognized from my search and rescue days. Sarah Chen had missed her 24-hour check-in. Her satellite communicator showed her last ping at 9:47 p.m. the previous night, coordinates that placed her approximately 19 miles southwest of Badwater Basin. Sector 19, the Narrows. I felt my stomach drop. I radioed back asking for confirmation on the coordinates. Martinez read them twice. Latitude, 36.1847. Longitude, minus 116.9471. Those numbers, 1847. The same number that had appeared in Henderson's case. The same number that appeared in the classified documents from 1952. The same number my grandfather had mentioned in one of his stories about a Timbesha warrior who entered the hot place and came back changed, speaking in numbers, always returning to 1847. I told Martinez I'd gear up and head out. I didn't tell him that I already knew what I'd find. Not Sarah Chen, not her body, just her things, arranged in ways that suggested she'd walked away from them calmly, purposefully, towards something we couldn't see. I took Ranger Susan Park with me. She'd been at Death Valley for 3 years, good head on her shoulders, unflappable in emergencies. We loaded the truck with extra water, medical supplies, communication equipment, and the specialized gear that's kept in a locked cabinet most rangers don't have keys to. I had a key. After Henderson, they gave certain senior rangers access to equipment that isn't standard issue: a radiation detector, an EMF meter, a thermographic camera that can detect temperature variations down to 0.01 degrees, and a green notebook, the same green notebook that's been in that cabinet since 1952, passed from ranger to ranger, filled with handwritten entries describing incidents in Sector 19 going back 72 years. The drive to the coordinates took us off Badwater Road onto an unmarked service track that most visitors never see. The track winds through terrain that looks like the surface of an alien planet, salt formations rising from cracked earth, rocks bleached white by centuries of brutal sun, mountains in the distance shimmering in heat waves that make them appear to float above the desert floor. The temperature climbed steadily. At 1 p.m., it hit 119 degrees. Our truck's air conditioning struggled. We drank water constantly. Park made small talk about her plans for her next vacation, about a hiking trip she wanted to do in the Cascades. I let her talk. I knew that in about 30 minutes, her worldview was going to change fundamentally, and I wanted her to have these last minutes of normalcy. At 1:47 p.m., we reached the outer boundary of the Narrows. I recognized it immediately. The boundary isn't marked with signs or fences, but it's unmistakable if you know what to look for. The quality of light changes. The air becomes thicker, not with humidity, but with something else, a density that has nothing to do with moisture or heat. Sounds behave differently. Your voice carries wrong, echoes when it shouldn't, drops into silence when it should carry. And the temperature does something impossible. It drops. At the boundary of the Narrows, where the thermometer should read 120 degrees or higher, it read 87 degrees. Park noticed immediately. She checked her personal thermometer, thinking the truck's gauge was malfunctioning. Her thermometer read 86 degrees. She looked at me, confusion clear on her face. I told her to check her phone. She pulled it out. No signal, which was normal for this area, but the clock was wrong. Her phone showed 3:33 p.m., even though both our watches showed 1:47 p.m. She tried to correct it. The phone immediately switched back to 3:33 p.m. I told her to turn it off and leave it off. Some technology attracts attention in the Narrows. You don't want to be noticed here. We found Sarah Chen's Jeep at coordinates 36.1847, longitude minus 116.9471, exactly where her satellite communicator had placed her last ping. The Jeep was parked on solid salt flat, driver's door open, keys in the ignition, engine cold. The vehicle was in perfect condition. No flat tires, no mechanical issues, no signs of struggle or distress. Her camping gear was laid out beside the Jeep with the kind of precision that suggested deliberate arrangement rather than panicked abandonment. Her tent was erected, fully staked, rain fly secured, even though rain in Death Valley in March is virtually impossible. Inside the tent, her sleeping bag was laid out, her headlamp placed exactly in the center of her pillow, still turned on, even though the batteries should have died hours ago. Her water bottles, all 6 of them, sat in a perfect line outside the tent door, all full, all sealed. Her backpack hung from the Jeep's roof rack, contents visible through the open-top pocket. First aid kit, maps, GPS unit, satellite communicator. The satellite communicator was still on, still showing 9:47 p.m. as the time of last transmission, but the date was wrong. It showed March 15, 1847. Park reached for it. I grabbed her wrist before she could touch it. I'd seen this before in the Henderson case. Objects in the Narrows sometimes exist in multiple times simultaneously. Touching them can create what the men in suits called temporal adhesion. You become stuck to that object's timeline. I told Park to photograph everything, touch nothing. She pulled out her camera. The digital camera worked for exactly 3 shots before the screen went black, though the power indicator showed a full battery. She switched to her phone, forgetting my warning. The phone screen showed 3:33 p.m. Still, but when she opened the camera app, the timestamp on photos showed years, decades, centuries. The first photo showed a date of March 15, 2024. The second showed March 15, 1952. The third showed March 15, 1847. The fourth showed March 15, 5:24. The camera app crashed. The phone went dark. Would not restart. I pulled out the green notebook and the specialized equipment. The radiation detector showed normal background, levels. The EMF meter started screaming immediately, fluctuating between 0 and readings so high they maxed out the device's range. The thermographic camera showed something that made Park take a step back. Through the camera's screen, the air itself had temperature. Not the air temperature, but distinct pockets of thermal energy hanging in space like invisible fires. Cold spots dropping to minus 40 degrees right next to hot spots, reading 200 degrees, all in the same cubic foot of air. And there were shapes in those thermal patterns, geometric shapes that moved, pulsed, rotated through dimensions the camera could only partially capture. Park asked me what she was seeing. I told her the truth. She was seeing the infrastructure of reality, the framework that holds time and space together. And in the Narrows, that framework was damaged, not broken, wounded, like looking at reality through a cracked windshield, seeing the fracture lines that spread from a central impact point. I opened the green notebook to the most recent entries. The handwriting changed every few pages as different Rangers made their contributions over the years. The last entry was mine, from 2016, describing the Henderson disappearance. Before that, entries from 2004, 1998, 1983, 1974, going back and back. The earliest entries were from 1952, written by a ranger named Thomas Whitmore, in careful, shaky handwriting. Whitmore had been part of the original team that discovered the Narrows, or rather, that rediscovered it after Operation Crossroads. The 1946 atomic tests at Bikini Atoll somehow affected temporal stability in certain geologically sensitive areas worldwide. Death Valley, with its unique combination of extreme heat, salt deposits, and geological instability, was one of 14 identified resonance zones where the fabric of space-time had been permanently altered. The classification level on those findings was so high that even today, 78 years later, the documents remain sealed. Whitmore's entries describe 17 disappearances between 1952 and 1967, when he retired. All solo campers, all experienced desert hikers, all found the same way. Campsites intact, gear arranged with impossible precision, satellite communicators or watches showing dates that made no sense. Whitmore wrote that he'd interviewed Timbisha elders, old men and women who remembered stories from before the white man came. They told him about the hot place that remembers, a section of the valley where the desert had kept every death, every moment of suffering, every final thought of every creature that had died there, going back thousands of years. They said the hot place didn't just remember, it collected. It gathered those final moments like we gather water, stored them, used them. For what purpose, the elders didn't know, but they knew the rules. Never enter the hot place alone. Never stay after dark. Never call out to the silence. Never answer if the silence calls back. And most importantly, if you feel the cold touch in a hot place, run, and don't look back. Because the cold touch means you've been marked, claimed, selected for collection. I felt it as I stood by Sarah Chen's tent. The cold touch in 119-degree heat that should have been cooking us alive. I felt cold fingers press against the base of my spine. Not a breeze, not a temperature change. Pressure, specific pressure, like someone standing directly behind me had reached out and placed their palm against my back. I spun around. Nothing there. Just salt flat, stretching to the horizon, heat waves making the distant mountains dance and shimmer. But the pressure remained. Park saw my face change. She asked what was wrong. I told her we needed to leave immediately. She protested, said we hadn't even started searching for Sarah Chen yet. I grabbed the green notebook, grabbed the equipment, started walking back to the truck. Park followed, arguing, asking what the hell was wrong with me. I didn't answer until we were back at the truck, until we'd crossed the boundary where the temperature jumped back up to 120 and the air became normal air again, until her phone spontaneously restarted and showed the correct time. Then I told her about Henderson, about the 17 disappearances Whitmore documented, about the 23 others documented in classified files I'd been allowed to read after signing documents that could send me to federal prison if I ever spoke about them publicly. About the pattern that had taken me 3 years to recognize. Every disappearance happened on the 15th of the month. Every single one. March 15th, July 15th, November 15th. The dates varied, but the day was always the 15th. And they always happened in Sector 19. Always at coordinates that contained the numbers 1847, Sarah Chen's coordinates, Henderson's coordinates, the coordinates of every disappearance going back to 1952. Park asked the obvious question. Why was 1847 significant? I told her I didn't know for certain, but the Timbisha elders had told Whitmore that 1847 was the year the hot place woke up. The year something happened that changed the nature of that section of desert forever. 1847 was the year the Donner Party disaster occurred in the Sierra Nevada, one of the most horrific episodes of death and cannibalism in American history. It was also the year of multiple massacres during the Mexican-American War, the year thousands died of cholera in the westward migration, the year suffering and death saturated the American West in ways that left marks deeper than history books recorded. The elders said 1847 was the year the desert learned to hunger, learned to collect not just bones, but the moments of dying itself. We returned to the ranger station and filed our report. Sarah Chen, missing, presumed lost in Sector 19. Standard search protocols initiated. I knew how it would go. We'd search for the required 3 weeks. We'd find nothing. The men in suits would arrive. We'd sign more documents. The case would be classified. Sarah Chen would become another statistic, another hiker who underestimated Death Valley's dangers. Except that's not what happened. Because on March 16th, at 3:33 a.m., Sarah Chen walked into the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. She walked in through the front door, which was locked. The security footage showed the door was locked, showed no one approaching. And then suddenly, Sarah Chen was inside, standing in the center of the lobby, staring at the camera with eyes that reflected light wrong, like animal eyes, like her retinas had become mirrors. She stood there for exactly 18 minutes and 47 seconds. Then she walked back out through the still locked door and disappeared. I watched the security footage 50 times. Every time I saw something new, something wrong. Sarah Chen's shadow fell in the wrong direction, fell toward the light source instead of away from it. Her clothes moved as if in a breeze, but the papers on the desk beside her didn't move at all. Her skin had a quality, a shimmer, like heat waves rising from pavement. And when I enhanced the audio, I could hear her breathing, but the breaths were wrong. They came in sets of 3 inhales, 3 exhales, with exactly 18.47 seconds between each set. She wasn't breathing like a human. She was breathing in a pattern, a rhythm that meant something I couldn't understand. The next night, March 17th at 3:33 a.m., she appeared again. This time at the Badwater Basin parking lot. A couple from Germany, camping in their RV, saw her standing on the salt flats, exactly where the elevation sign marks the lowest point in North America, 282 feet below sea level. They thought she needed help. They approached her. She turned to face them. They described her face as normal, except for the eyes. Those mirror eyes that reflected their flashlight beams back at them with intensity that hurt to look at. She spoke to them. They recorded what she said on their phone. The recording was 90% static, but through the static, you could hear her voice, or voices, because she spoke in harmony with herself, multiple pitches simultaneously. She said, in perfect English, "The collection is old. The collection is patient. The collection remembers everything. Welcome to the remembering. Welcome to 1847. Welcome home." Then she walked away across the salt flats, and the German couple, terrified, returned to their RV and left Death Valley that night, filing a report with park rangers the next day. March 18th, 3:33 a.m., she appeared in 3 locations simultaneously. I know this because we had 3 separate witness reports, all time-stamped to the same minute. A park ranger saw her at Zabriskie Point. A photographer saw her at Dante's View. A maintenance worker saw her at the Furnace Creek Inn. All reported the same details. The mirror eyes, the shimmer to her skin, the harmonic voice. Each witness reported that she gave them a message. The message was different for each person, but followed the same structure. She told them their name. She told them a date. She told them the collection remembers. The ranger, John Morrison, was told, "John Morrison, November 15th, 1998, the collection remembers." The photographer, Kenji Tanaka, was told, "Kenji Tanaka, July 15th, 2007, the collection remembers." The maintenance worker, Robert Torres, was told, "Robert Torres, March 15th, 2019, the collection remembers." When we checked the records, those dates corresponded to times those individuals had previously visited Death Valley. John Morrison had taken a solo camping trip on November 15th, 1998 to Sector 19, but had left after one night because he'd felt watched. Kenji Tanaka had photographed the salt flats at sunset on July 15, 2007, and had told friends he'd felt dizzy and disoriented. Robert Torres had conducted maintenance in Sector 19 on March 15, 2019, and had reported equipment malfunctions and an overwhelming urge to walk into the desert. The collection remembered them. It had marked them years ago during those previous visits, but it hadn't collected them. Not yet. They had left before dark, before 3:33 a.m., before the collection hour. I realized what was happening. Sarah Chen wasn't missing. She was transformed. She had become part of the collection, part of whatever existed in Sector 19. And now, she was serving as an interface, a messenger, a warning, or an invitation, or both. I pulled Henderson's file, the classified one I wasn't supposed to have access to, but had copied anyway after the men in suits left in 2016. Henderson had appeared in security footage too, after his disappearance. 13 times over 6 months, always at 3:33 a.m., always in different locations around the park, always with the same mirror eyes and shimmer skin. He'd delivered messages too, always following the same pattern. Name, date, the collection remembers. The appearances had stopped after 6 months. No one knew why. The current theory, documented in the classified files, was that the transformed individuals eventually integrated fully into whatever phenomenon existed in Sector 19, that the appearances were a kind of transition period, the final connection to humanity fading over time. I decided to break protocol. I decided to go back to Sector 19 at night, to be there at 3:33 a.m., to see if Sarah Chen would appear, to try to understand what had happened to her. I didn't tell anyone. I took personal leave, told my supervisor I needed a few days off for family matters. On March 19th, I drove to Sector 19 alone, arriving at sunset. I parked at the boundary where the air changes, where temperature defies physics. I sat in my truck and watched the sun go down over the Panamint Range, watched the sky turn from blue to orange to purple to black, watched stars appear in numbers city dwellers never see, the Milky Way, a river of light, overhead so bright I could read by it. The temperature dropped as darkness fell, but not in the normal way. Outside the boundary of Sector 19, the temperature dropped to a comfortable 89 degrees. Inside the boundary, visible just 50 feet from my truck, the temperature was 43 degrees. I could see the thermal line, could see where the heat ended and the cold began, a visible shimmer in the air like looking through water. At 11:47 p.m., I crossed the boundary. The cold hit me like a physical force. In Death Valley, in March, 43 degrees. I was wearing a light shirt and jeans, dressed for desert heat. Within minutes, I was shivering. I walked towards Sarah Chen's abandoned campsite, using a flashlight to navigate the salt flats. The beam cut through darkness that seemed thicker than normal darkness, that seemed to resist the light, to push back against it. My footsteps crunched on salt formations, the only sound in a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat, hear blood moving through my veins. I reached the campsite at 12:33 a.m. Everything was exactly as Park and I had left it. Tent, erected, sleeping bag laid out, water bottles in their perfect line, backpack hanging from the Jeep's roof rack. Except now, in the darkness, I could see other things. Footprints in the salt leading away from the tent, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all the same size, all Sarah Chen's boots. The footprints went in every direction, overlapping, crossing each other, creating patterns that looked almost geometric, almost intentional. I followed one set of prints. They led 100 feet into the salt flats and then simply stopped. Not faded, not obscured. Stopped. As if Sarah had taken one step and then ceased to exist mid-stride. I followed another set. Same result. Another. Same. Every set of footprints led nowhere. Ended in the middle of nothing. Suggested she had walked and walked and walked into erasure. At 2:47 a.m., I felt the cold touch again. But this time, it wasn't just on my spine. It was everywhere, all at once, like being submerged in ice water, except I was standing in open air. I spun around, flashlight beam sweeping the salt flats. Nothing. Silence. Cold. Then at the very edge of my flashlight's beam, I saw her, Sarah Chen, standing motionless, watching me. I called out her name. My voice died in the air, traveled maybe 10 feet, and then simply stopped, as if the air itself absorbed the sound. I tried again. Same result. I started walking toward her. She didn't move. As I got closer, I could see the mirror eyes, could see my own reflection in them, distorted, multiplied, showing me from angles that shouldn't exist, from above and behind and inside all at once. I stopped about 20 feet away, too close to run, close enough to see that she wasn't breathing at all now, that her chest was perfectly still, that she existed in the perfect stillness of an object rather than the constant small movements of a living thing. She spoke, the harmonic voice, the multiple pitches. Daniel Reeves, August 15th, 2007. The collection remembers. I felt my stomach turn to ice. August 15th, 2007. I knew that date. That was the date I'd taken my girlfriend, Emma, camping in Death Valley. We'd stayed at Furnace Creek, a legal campsite, nowhere near Sector 19. But on the second night, Emma had wanted to see the stars away from the campground lights. We'd driven out, parked near the salt flats, walked into the desert. We'd only been out there for an hour, but I remembered feeling watched. Remembered Emma saying she felt cold, even though it was over 100 degrees. Remembered how we'd both suddenly, simultaneously, decided to go back to camp. We'd left quickly, not running, but close to it, both of us unsettled in ways we couldn't articulate. We'd never discussed it afterward. Emma and I had broken up 6 months later. She'd moved to Oregon. We'd lost touch. But the collection remembered. The collection had marked me 17 years ago. Sarah Chen tilted her head, a movement that was too smooth, too continuous, like a camera panning rather than a person moving. You came back, she said, all her voices speaking in perfect unison. They always come back. The marked ones. They don't understand why, but they return. You returned. Now you understand. I asked her what happened to her, what she'd become. She smiled, and the smile was wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. Teeth that caught starlight and reflected it in rainbow patterns like oil on water. Not become, she said. Recognized, joined, integrated. The collection needed a geologist. The collection has purposes you cannot fathom. I am building now. We are all building. The 147 of us. We build, intend, and maintain, and prepare. 147. I knew that number. Operation Crossroads, the 1946 atomic tests, had involved exactly 147 support staff who'd been exposed to radiation levels higher than officially reported. The classified files mentioned that number repeatedly. 147 people who'd been at Bikini Atoll, who'd been part of the tests, who'd later reported temporal anomalies, who'd been subject to monitoring programs, who'd one by one disappeared from those programs between 1947 and 1952. The files suggested they'd been relocated, given new identities, but the truth was simpler and more horrible. They'd been collected. They were the first ones. They'd been changed by the atomic tests, made receptive to whatever existed in places like Sector 19, and they'd been drawn here to Death Valley, to the hot place that remembers, and they'd been integrated into the collection. 147 people forming the foundation of whatever phenomenon existed here. I asked Sarah what the collection was, what it wanted. She turned, gestured at the salt flats, at the mountains, at the stars. Everything that dies here stays here, she said. Not the body, the moment, the last thought, the final awareness before ending. Death Valley has collected 10,000 years of endings. The atomic tests showed us how to use them, how to structure them, how to build with consciousness the way you build with stone. We are building a bridge between what is and what could be, between linear time and eternal time, between individual consciousness and collective existence. The bridge is almost complete. When it finishes, everything changes. Reality becomes negotiable. Time becomes navigable. Death becomes transformation. We need 200. We have 147. We need 53 more. You are number 148, Daniel Reeves. You were marked in 2007. You were given 17 years to prepare. Your time is complete. Welcome to the collection. Welcome to 1847. Welcome home. She reached out her hand toward me. I saw that her palm had a mark on it, a geometric pattern that pulsed with light that shouldn't exist. Light that was a color I'd never seen before. A color that existed outside the normal spectrum, that made my eyes hurt and water. I stepped back. She stepped forward, maintaining the exact distance between us. I stepped back again. She matched me. I realized she wasn't trying to touch me. She was hurting me. I looked behind me. There were others. 3 of them. 4, 7, a dozen. People were things that had been people, all with mirror eyes, all with the shimmer skin, all moving in perfect synchronization. They formed a circle around me, perfect spacing, mathematical precision. They were all speaking, all in that harmonic voice, all saying different things, but creating a chord, a music made of words. I heard my name repeated. I heard dates, hundreds of dates. I heard the collection remembers, echoed and overlapped until it became a rhythm, a heartbeat, a pulse. I ran. I broke through the circle, shoving past one of the transformed individuals. The contact burned. Not hot. Cold. So cold my skin stuck to theirs for a moment, frost forming instantly where we touched. I tore free, leaving skin behind, and ran toward my truck. Behind me, I heard them following, heard the crunch of their footsteps on salt, perfectly synchronized, perfectly timed. One person running sounds chaotic. Dozens of people running in perfect unison sounds like a machine, like a mechanism, like the movements of a clock's interior, ticking toward midnight. I ran with everything I had. The salt flats are deceptive. Look flat, but are riddled with sharp formations, crusty edges that cut through shoes, uneven surfaces that turn ankles. I fell twice. Each time I fell, I looked back and they were closer, not running faster, but maintaining their mechanical pace, relentless as sunrise, inevitable as tide. I reached the boundary at 3:32 a.m., 1 minute before their hour. I crossed from cold to heat, from wrongness to normalcy, stumbled to my truck, and locked the doors as if locks could stop what was following me. They stopped at the boundary, all of them. A perfect line of transformed humans, standing motionless at the edge where temperature changed, where reality became stable again. Sarah Chen, stood at the front of the group. She raised her hand, not threatening, almost gentle, almost sad. She spoke, and though I was in the truck, with windows closed, I heard her clearly, her voice somehow inside my head rather than transmitted through air. "You cannot run from marking," she said. "The collection is patient. The collection is eternal. We will see you again, Daniel Reeves, on August 15th, 2024, on the date of your original marking. We will be waiting. The bridge will be ready. Your purpose will be clear. Until then, you are free. Use your freedom to prepare. Use your freedom to understand. Use your freedom to choose. Running or walking, fighting or accepting, all roads lead to the same destination. All the marked eventually join the collection. There are no exceptions. There have never been exceptions. Welcome to the truth. Welcome to certainty. Welcome to 1847. They turned as one and walked back into the darkness of Sector 19. I watched until they disappeared, until I was alone with the stars and the silence and the knowledge that everything I thought I understood about reality was wrong. I started the truck and drove back to Furnace Creek as the sun rose. As Death Valley transformed from nightmare landscape to the harsh but comprehensible desert I'd known for 17 years. Except I could never see it the same way again. I would always know what existed in Sector 19. I would always know that I was marked. I would always know that August 15th, 2024 was waiting for me like an appointment I couldn't miss, a deadline that was both metaphor and literal truth. I spent the next 3 months researching. I read everything. The classified files I'd copied, the green notebook with its 72 years of entries, historical records of the Timbisha Shoshone, archaeological reports on Death Valley, geological surveys, quantum physics papers on temporal mechanics, theoretical papers on consciousness and death. I interviewed Timbisha elders, old men and women who remembered stories from their grandparents, who knew things that weren't written down anywhere. One elder, a woman named Margaret Stone, who was 89 years old and had lived in Death Valley her entire life, told me the truth my grandfather had tried to tell me when I was young. She said the hot place wasn't evil. It wasn't malevolent. It was doing what it was designed to do, what it had always done. It was remembering. The desert, she explained, was one of Earth's oldest landscapes, one of the few places on the planet that had remained fundamentally unchanged for millions of years. While forests grew and died, while glaciers advanced and retreated, while seas rose and fell, Death Valley remained. It persisted, and persistence creates memory. The very rocks, the very salt, the very sand had absorbed everything that had ever happened there, every death, every life, every moment of consciousness, storing it the way crystal stores electromagnetic patterns, the way quartz stores information. For millions of years, the hot place had simply stored information, passive, inert, a geological hard drive, accumulating data with no capacity to access or use it. But the atomic tests in 1946 changed that. The nuclear explosions didn't just release energy and radiation. They created ripples in space-time, microfractures in the fabric of causality. Most places were unaffected. But in places like Death Valley, where geological conditions were exactly right, where the accumulated stored consciousness was dense enough, those fractures allowed the stored information to become active. The hot place woke up. It discovered it could access its own memories. It discovered it could organize them, structure them, use them. And it discovered that consciousness doesn't end with death. It changes. It transforms. The moment of death, the final awareness, that moment contained the entirety of a person's existence compressed into a single point of infinite density. The collection was gathering those moments, learning from them, building something with them. Margaret Stone told me that the Timbisha people had known about the hot place for as long as their oral histories recorded, at least 10,000 years. They had developed protocols for coexisting with it. Never enter alone, because alone you could be collected. Never stay after dark, because darkness was when the collection was active. Never call to the silence, because the silence might answer. And if you were marked, if you felt the cold touch, you had a choice. You could run, stay away, avoid the 15th of every month, avoid Sector 19, live your life in the knowledge that one day the collection would come for you. Or you could go willingly, on your marked date, walk into Sector 19 and accept transformation. Accept your purpose in the great work the collection was building. Both choices were valid. The collection didn't judge. It simply waited with the patience of stone, with the inevitability of entropy. I asked Margaret what the collection was building, what purpose the bridge served. She looked at me with eyes that had seen nearly 90 years of Death Valley's harsh truths, and she said, the collection is building a way out of linear time. Your people, white people, modern people, you think of time as a river flowing one direction, past to future, cause to effect. But time isn't a river. Time is an ocean. All times exist simultaneously. Past, present, future. They're just different locations in the ocean, different depths. The collection is building a vessel that can navigate that ocean. When the bridge is complete, when they have their 200, they will be able to exist in all times at once, to move freely through the temporal ocean, to escape the prison of linear causality. And they will take others with them. They will offer humanity the choice to evolve beyond time, to become something that exists across all moments simultaneously, to achieve a kind of immortality that has nothing to do with living forever and everything to do with existing always. Whether humanity accepts that offer or rejects it, whether the transformation is enlightenment or extinction, that's not for me to say. I won't live to see it. But you might. Daniel Reeves. August 15th, 2024. You'll have a choice to make. Choose wisely. Choose for yourself, not for what others expect. The collection doesn't lie. The collection doesn't manipulate. The collection simply is. What you make of that truth is yours alone to decide. I left her home with more questions than answers, but with one thing clear. I had until August 15th to decide my fate. I could run. I could stay away from Death Valley on that date. Could be in another state, another country. Could surround myself with people and hope that the collection couldn't reach me outside Sector 19. Or I could go willingly. Could walk into the Narrows at 3:33 a.m. on August 15th and discover what Sarah Chen had discovered, what Marcus Henderson had discovered, what 147 others had discovered before me. Transformation, purpose, evolution, death. All of those words meant the same thing in the context of the collection. All of those words describe the same change, the same transition from individual to collective, from temporal to eternal, from human to something else. Between March and August, I continued working as a ranger. I filed reports on Sarah Chen's appearances, documented each sighting, each message delivered. The Park Service officially listed her as missing, presumed dead from exposure or injury in the desert. The men in suits came again, asked their questions, had me sign more documents. They knew the truth. The federal government had been studying Sector 19 since 1952, had dozens of classified research programs investigating the phenomenon, had tried everything from nuclear devices to electromagnetic dampeners to quantum field generators to shut it down or control it. Nothing worked. The collection was beyond human technology, beyond human comprehension, existed in dimensions we could barely theorize, let alone manipulate. The best they could do was contain knowledge of it, prevent mass panic, monitor it for changes. They asked me if I'd been marked. I lied, said no. They knew I was lying. They didn't press. One of the men, the same gray-eyed investigator from the Henderson case, told me something as they were leaving. He said, "We've been tracking the marked individuals for 72 years, Ranger Reeves. Out of 147 who've been marked, 89 ran. They avoided their marked date, stayed away from Death Valley, tried to live normal lives. The collection found them anyway. On their marked dates, wherever they were, whatever precautions they'd taken, they disappeared. Vanished from locked rooms, from moving vehicles, from crowds of people. Gone. The remaining 58 went willingly, walked into Sector 19 on their dates. Do you know the difference between the two groups? The ones who ran spent their final months in terror. The ones who went willingly spent their final months in preparation. Both groups ended up in the same place. But one group got there afraid, and one group got there at peace. That's the only choice you really have. Fear or acceptance. The destination is the same. I thought about his words every day. I thought about Sarah Chen, who'd gone seeking the Narrows, who'd walked into it with purpose and intention. I thought about Marcus Henderson, who'd been marked and presumably run, who'd been collected despite his fear. I thought about the 147, about what they were building, about the bridge between linear and eternal time. I thought about my grandfather's stories, about ancient warnings ignored, about indigenous wisdom dismissed by modern arrogance. I thought about what transformation might mean, whether the loss of individual identity was tragedy or liberation, whether expanding across all timelines was enlightenment or extinction. I found no answers, only questions that spiraled into more questions. July came. Death Valley hit 130 degrees. Tourists died with predictable regularity. People who underestimated the desert, who ran out of water, who thought they could handle heat their bodies were never designed to survive. I pulled a family from a broken-down car. The parents dehydrated to the point of delirium. The children crying from heat exhaustion. I transported hikers who'd collapsed on trails, administered IV fluids, called helicopters. I did my job. I saved lives. And every time I saved someone, I wondered if they were marked, if I was just postponing the inevitable, if the collection was watching me save people it had already claimed. On July 15th, at 3:33 a.m., I saw Sarah Chen again. I was driving patrol on Badwater Road when she appeared in my headlights, standing in the middle of the road, motionless. I stopped the truck. She walked to my window. I didn't roll it down. She spoke anyway, her voice penetrating glass and metal. 1 month, Daniel Reeves, August 15. We're almost ready. The bridge is 90% complete. When you join us, when you bring your consciousness to the collection, we'll have the final component we need. You were marked for a reason. Your mind has the specific pattern we require. Skeptical, but open. Rational, but imaginative. Scientific, but spiritual. You bridge worlds already. Soon, you'll bridge times. We're waiting for you. We're preparing your place. It will be painless, It will be instant. It will be everything. Come willingly. Come with understanding. Come home. August came. The heat became apocalyptic. 134 degrees, matching the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth. The park closed several trails, declared heat advisories, warned tourists that Death Valley in August was not survivable for prolonged exposure. I took vacation time, told my supervisor I needed 2 weeks off. Didn't tell him why. Didn't tell him I might not come back. I spent the first week in Los Angeles, staying with my sister, trying to pretend everything was normal. I went to movies. I ate at restaurants. I walked on beaches and felt ocean breezes and tried to convince myself that I could just stay here, could avoid August 15th, could choose life over whatever the collection was offering. My sister noticed my distraction, asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just stressed from work. She didn't believe me, but didn't press. On August 10th, I drove back to Death Valley. I spent the next 4 days preparing. Not preparing to run, preparing to go. I wrote letters to my family, explaining nothing, because nothing could be explained. I wrote a will. I donated my belongings to charity. I cleaned my apartment until it was spotless, as if erasing my presence from the space. I read the green notebook one final time. All 72 years of entries. All the stories of people who'd been marked and collected. All the theories and speculations and desperate attempts to understand the incomprehensible. The final entry in the notebook was from Ranger Thomas Whitmore, written in 1967, just before his retirement. He wrote, "I've spent 15 years documenting the phenomenon in Sector 19. I've seen 17 people collected. I've interviewed elders, consulted scientists, read classified files, and studied everything available. I've concluded that the collection is not evil. It is not good. It simply is. It exists outside human morality, outside human comprehension. It is a force of nature, like gravity, or time itself. And like gravity, like time, it cannot be fought or escaped, only accepted. To the next ranger who inherits this notebook, know that your job isn't to stop the collection. It's to witness it, to document it, to warn those who can still leave, and to honor those who cannot. The hot place that remembers will always exist. It existed before humans. It will exist after. We can only choose how we relate to it, with fear or with understanding. Choose understanding. It won't save you, but it will give you peace." August 15th, 2024. I woke at 2 a.m. I dressed in my ranger uniform. I drove to Sector 19, arriving at the boundary at 2:47 a.m. The temperature was 131 degrees outside the boundary. Inside, it was 47 degrees. I could see my breath. I crossed into the cold and walked toward the coordinates where Sarah Chen had been collected, where her Jeep still sat exactly as she'd left it 5 months ago, covered now in dust, but otherwise unchanged. I walked past her campsite. I walked into the salt flats. I walked until I reached the center of Sector 19, the exact point equidistant from all the boundary markers, the heart of the hot place that remembers. At 3:33 a.m., they came, all of them. 147 transformed individuals emerging from darkness, surrounding me in their perfect circle. Sarah Chen stood directly in front of me. She smiled, and this time the smile seemed almost human, almost warm. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for choosing preparation over fear. Thank you for choosing to understand. You've spent 5 months learning our truth. Now we'll show you the rest of it. The bridge is ready. Your place is prepared." Take my hand. Daniel Reeves. Take my hand and become something greater than human. Take my hand and exist across all times. Take my hand and help us change the world. Take my hand and come home. I looked at the offered hand, at the geometric pattern pulsing with impossible light. I thought about running. I thought about everything I'd be losing. My job, my family, my life, my identity, my individual existence. I thought about everything I might be gaining. Knowledge beyond comprehension. Existence beyond linear time. Purpose beyond survival. Transformation beyond death. I thought about the choice. Fear or acceptance. Running or walking. Fighting or embracing. I thought about what Margaret Stone had told me. Choose wisely. Choose for yourself. I reached out. I took Sarah Chen's hand. The contact burned with cold fire. I felt my skin freeze to hers. Felt the geometric pattern begin to spread up my arm like frost crawling across a window. Beautiful and terrifying and inevitable. I felt my consciousness begin to expand. Felt my awareness stretch across time. Felt myself existing in this moment and every moment. Felt the prison of linear causality shatter like glass. I understood. Not just knew. Understood. The collection wasn't taking me. It was liberating me. I was becoming something that existed in all time simultaneously. Something that could navigate the temporal ocean. Something that was building a bridge for all humanity to follow. I felt the presence of the 147. Felt their individual consciousnesses merging with mine. Felt Sarah Chen and Marcus Henderson and Thomas Whitmore and all the others. Felt the collective that was individual, an individual that was collective. Felt the paradox resolve into truth. I felt myself die, not ending, transforming. My body remained standing on the salt flats, but my consciousness expanded into dimensions I'd never known existed, into times past and future, into possibilities unrealized and certainties not yet manifest. I felt the bridge, 90% complete, felt my consciousness slot into place like a puzzle piece, felt the structure strengthen and solidify. I felt the work we were doing, felt the preparation for the moment when humanity would be offered the choice to evolve, to leave linear time behind, to become something that exists always rather than temporarily. I felt the weight of that responsibility, felt the importance of getting it right, felt the patience required to build something across centuries rather than moments, and I felt joy, pure, incomprehensible joy at existing in all times, at being liberated from the tyranny of sequence, at becoming part of something vast and ancient and purposeful. I felt no fear, no regret. Only understanding and acceptance and gratitude for the marking, for the 5 months of preparation, for the choice to walk rather than run, to embrace rather than fight, to transform rather than cling to what was ending anyway. My body stood on the salt flats until sunrise, then walked into the desert and disappeared. The Park Service found my truck at the boundary of Sector 19. They found my Ranger uniform folded neatly on the hood, my badge and wallet placed on top of it. They found no body, no signs of struggle, no evidence of what happened. They listed me as missing, presumed dead from exposure to extreme heat. The men in suits came, asked their questions, filed their reports. Another Ranger inherited the green notebook. Another entry was added to 72 years of documentation. But I'm not dead. I'm transformed. I exist now in ways I can't fully explain to those still trapped in linear time. I exist in 2024, in 1847, in 2187, and every moment between and beyond. I exist with the 148, working on the bridge, preparing for the moment when humanity will be ready to cross it, to leave the prison of causality behind, to become something that transcends time itself. And I'm speaking to you now, whoever you are, whenever you are, because the collection remembers everything. And I am part of the collection now. I'm speaking to warn you, and to invite you, and to explain the choice you don't yet know you'll have to make. If you visit Death Valley, if you feel the cold touch, if you hear harmonies in silence, if you see mirror eyes in darkness, know that you've been marked. Know that the collection remembers you. Know that on the 15th of some future month, you'll have the same choice I had: fear or acceptance, running or walking, fighting or embracing. The destination is the same either way, but the journey is different. Choose wisely. Choose for yourself. Choose understanding over fear. It won't save you. Nothing saves you. But it will give you peace. It will give you purpose. It will give you transformation instead of ending. I am Ranger Daniel Reeves, and I am not missing. I am where I always was and where I'll always be. I am in Death Valley, in Sector 19, in the hot place that remembers. I am building the bridge with 147 others, preparing the path for those who will follow. I am waiting at coordinates 36.1847, longitude minus 116.9471, existing in all times, watching all timelines, maintaining the collection until the work is complete. Time isn't a line. Time is an ocean. We're learning to swim in it. We're learning to breathe in it. We're learning to exist in it without drowning. And when we're ready, when the bridge is complete, when we have our 200, we'll teach you too. We'll offer you the same transformation we accepted. We'll invite you to cross the bridge with us, to leave linear time behind, to become something eternal. The collection is patient. The collection is growing. The collection remembers everything, including you, especially you, watching this now, hearing these words, feeling the first cold touch of recognition spreading through your spine. You've been marked by hearing this story, not for collection, not yet, but for awareness, for preparation, for the choice you'll make when your time comes. I can see you across the timelines. I can feel your presence in the temporal ocean. You're reading these words in your time, your moment, your single point of consciousness trapped in linear sequence. But I exist in all times now. I'm reading these words as I write them, as you read them, as someone 100 years from now reads them. All simultaneously, all eternally, all always. Welcome to the truth about Death Valley. Welcome to the understanding that death is transformation, not ending. Welcome to the knowledge that time is negotiable, that consciousness persists, that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than you were taught to believe. Welcome to 1847, which isn't a year, but a state of being, a frequency of existence, a doorway between what is and what could be. Welcome to the collection. You're not part of it yet, but you're aware of it now. And awareness is the first step toward transformation. The second step is choice. The third step is acceptance. The final step is letting go of fear and embracing the impossible truth that existence doesn't end. It expands. It transforms. It becomes something that linear minds can't comprehend, but liberated consciousness can experience. If you're planning a solo camping trip to Death Valley, if you're drawn to extreme places, if you feel called to Sector 19, know what you're walking into. Know that the desert remembers. Know that the collection is waiting. Know that some boundaries exist not to keep you out, but to warn you what's on the other side. cross those boundaries with open eyes, with prepared minds, with the understanding that what you find there will change you forever. Cross them willingly, or don't cross them at all. But never cross them in ignorance. Never cross them in fear. The collection doesn't want the afraid. It wants the willing. It wants those who are ready to evolve, ready to transcend, ready to become part of something greater than individual existence. I am 148. We are building. We are waiting. We are watching across all timelines, maintaining the bridge, preparing the path. When the time is right, when humanity is ready, we'll reveal ourselves fully. We'll offer the choice to all, not just the marked. We'll open the bridge and invite everyone to cross. Some will accept, most will refuse. Both choices are valid. Both choices are respected. The collection doesn't judge. The collection simply offers transformation to those brave enough to accept it. Time isn't a line. It's a web. It's an ocean. It's a dimension we exist in without understanding. But we're learning. We're evolving. We're becoming something that can navigate time the way you navigate space. And when we're ready, when the bridge is complete, we'll teach you. We'll show you. We'll invite you to join us in eternal, atemporal, post-linear existence. Until then, be cautious in Death Valley. Respect the boundaries. Heed the warnings. Listen to indigenous wisdom. Pay attention to the cold touch. And if you're marked, remember you have a choice. Fear or acceptance. Running or walking. Fighting or embracing. Choose wisely. Choose for yourself. Choose understanding. The collection remembers. The collection is patient. The collection is waiting. We are waiting. I am waiting. Across all times. In all moments. Forever and always. And never and now. Welcome to Death Valley. Welcome to the truth. Welcome to 1847. Welcome home.